Hello, my name is Shathess Rao, and me and my team members from Phantom Group are going to present our final report for our group project on the subject Scientific Inquiry HEB1023. Moving on to the introduction of our study, the title of our study is Level of Awareness, Knowledge, Perception, and its influence on attitudes towards climate change and pro-environmental behavior. As you can see here, this is our study's problem statement. We have a total of 3 problem statements, which are limited awareness, knowledge and perception of university technology patronage personnel on climate change issues, lack of involvement of university technology patronage personnel in pro-environmental behavior, and the adaptation of the correct attitude toward climate change issues and individual behaviors. We have a total of 2 research questions, which is what is the level of awareness, knowledge and perception of university technology patronage personnel regarding climate change, and how does it influence the attitude towards climate change and pro-environmental behavior. The first objective of the study is to understand the level of climate change awareness, knowledge and perception among university technology patronage personnel in Malaysia. The second is to analyze how the identified factors influence attitude towards climate change and pro-environmental behavior among university technology patronage personnel in Malaysia. The third is to analyze how university technology patronage personnel respond to climate change issues. And the fourth is to promote university technology patronage personnel in taking action to overcome climate change issues. Our study has a total of 4 hypotheses, which is if university technology patronage personnel uses renewable energy and practices waste reduction, then they had and will continue to incorporate recycling concepts in their daily life. Second, if university technology patronage personnel is an environmental activist who recycles daily and participates in the Go Green movement program, which is conducted by university technology patronage, then they will have an adequate level of awareness of climate change issues. Third is if university technology patronage personnel have adequate knowledge, awareness and perception towards climate change issues, then they will have a positive attitude towards climate change issues. And the fourth is if university technology patronage personnel possesses a positive attitude towards climate change, then they will also possess better pro-environmental behavior. That's all from me. I'll pass the stage to my next group member for their part. Thank you.
Next, in the significance of the study, the term climate change describes that the evolution of the planet's climatic circumstances where numerous internal and external factors are to blame. So, identify and promote awareness, knowledge and perception among personnel of UTP in this study. Then, this research makes them to reflect on what kind of attitude they had all the times toward climate change issues, and it also conveys the message that if climate change issues are not dealt with it will halt their daily life soon to them. As a benefit of the anticipated outcome from the data gathered by policymakers of UTP, it promotes a positive influence on attitudes towards climate change issues and pro-environmental behavior. Besides, this study can influence the family members to practice pro-environmental behavior in the hopes of decreasing the severity of climate change issues to the household of UTP. Lastly, the education industry and local authorities can increase the awareness, knowledge and perception of climate change issues that guided by University Technology Patronage Go Green movement. Moving forward, next is research methodology. From the beginning to the end, there are 7 major sections required, which knowing the problem and the research questions, objective and significance of research. Then, the literature review such as article from the Google Scholar and data collection using questionnaire. Analysis of response from data collection placed in 5th place, followed by limitations, suggestions and recommendation to the future researchers, while the last is conclusion. Moving to the techniques and data collection method, here we use quantitative method to survey data collection and use Google Forms as our platform for the survey. There are 11 sections together with the respondents' response and feedback section as 12th section. The total questions of the survey are 73 questions. In addition, we also use online research for our research, which is via Google Scholar, to obtain relevant journals to identify the relationship between the level of awareness, knowledge, perception, and its influence on attitudes toward climate change issues and pro-environmental behavior. Next will be respondents of the study. For this study, we targeted UTP Foundation and undergraduate students with lectures and staff, with the target population is 251 respondents. We shared the survey to all the UTP's WhatsApp group and we managed to control the spreading accordingly. Then, all respondents answer the Google form that we already created and we analyze it based on the responses. Here, the pie charts are very visually appealing way to communicate the result of our study.
Hello, my name is Muhammad and I will now present the findings of this research. The first section of the questionnaire is demographic data. This question is about the gender of the respondents. There are more male respondents representing almost 50.6% of the total response compared to female respondents. Next, this question is about the age of the respondents. The reason that the range of age includes the younger demographic is that the survey is targeted to all UTPians, which includes University Technology Petronas Foundation and undergraduate students. Most of the respondents are aged between 17 to 20 years old, which represents 78.1% of total response. Moving on, this question is about the University Technology Petronas email of the respondents. This acts as proof that the 251 respondents of the survey are all UTPians. There is no duplicate email, so it's reassuring that there is no instance of the same responder submitting multiple responses for this survey. The second section, Section A, is meant to determine the level of environmental awareness. To conclude the findings in Section A, the level of environmental awareness is determined to be good. Most of the respondents have successfully displayed a good level of environmental awareness, and the questions the government has taken action to address climate change and manage the associated risk, and there have been extreme climate phenomena in the town I stay that were the only two questions deemed neutral that require more environmental awareness about it. Based on the findings of this section, we can conclude that UTP personnel is deemed to have a high level of environmental awareness. The third section, Section B, is meant to determine the level of awareness on various environmental risks posed by climate change issues. To conclude the findings in Section B, the level of awareness of various environmental risks posed by climate change issues is determined to be very good. The majority of the 251 respondents have successfully determined their actual exposure to various environmental risks posed by climate change issues, excluding the fire risk, which is the only environmental risk lacking a bit more awareness. Based on the findings of this section, we can conclude that UTP personnel is determined to have a high level of awareness of various environmental risks posed by climate change issues. The fourth section, Section C, is meant to determine the level of adoption of correct individual behaviors such as waste reduction, usage of renewable energy, and recycling. To conclude the findings in Section C, the level of adoption of correct individual behaviors such as waste reduction, usage of renewable energy, recycling, etc. is very high, excluding their neutral stand on using electric vehicles, public transport, and biological products due to understandable concerns. The finding in this section that the majority of the 251 respondents strongly agree to use renewable energies and minimize waste is in line with the finding that the majority of the 251 respondents strongly agreed to recycle and lessen the use of plastics. This supports the H1 hypothesis that if university technology patronage personnel uses renewable energy and practice waste reduction, then they would have and will continue to incorporate recycling concepts into their daily life. Based on the findings of this section, we can conclude that the H1 hypothesis is supported, and the UTP personnel is deemed to have a high level of adoption of correct individual behaviors thanks to a high level of awareness about climate change issues. The fifth section, Section D, is meant to determine the level of involvement as an environmental activist and participation in the Go Green movement campaign that is proposed by the government. To conclude the findings in Section D, the level of involvement as an environmental activist and participation in the Go Green movement campaign proposed by the government is low, given that they were very aware of the Go Green movement campaign, plus they did agree with the idea of it and believed it is an effective way to prevent climate change, but disagree to take part in the Go Green movement campaign and be an active member of any environmental organizations. This has proven that a low level of involvement as an environmental activist and participation in the Go Green movement campaign proposed by the government means a low level of awareness regarding climate change issues. This supports the H2 hypothesis that if university technology patronage personnel is an environmental activist who recycles daily and participates in the Go Green movement program, which is conducted by university technology patronage, then they will have an adequate level of awareness of climate change issues. Based on the finding of this section, we can conclude that the H2 hypothesis is supported.
Hi, I'm Chen, and I'll be continuing the presentation for the rest of our findings. The sixth section, Section E, is meant to determine the level of awareness of respondents towards climate change issues. As you can see, most respondents are aware of various climate change issues, whether it is through active or passive information search. News and information about climate change issues can be heard by UTP students. Based on the findings in this section, we can conclude that most UTP personnel have a high level of awareness of climate change issues. The seventh section, Section F, is meant to determine the level of knowledge of respondents about climate change issues. Overall, a large portion of respondents know about the different signs, causes, and effects of climate change. This shows that a large majority of UTP personnel already have a basic understanding of climate change issues, whether it is through their own observation and experience or different sources of media. It is shown that they are knowledgeable on various climate change issues. Thus, we can conclude that the majority of UTP personnel have a high level of knowledge of climate change issues. The eighth section, Section G, is meant to determine the level of comprehension of respondents regarding possible adaptation measures towards climate change. As we can see from the various responses, most respondents are knowledgeable on ways to mitigate climate change issues. The survey shows indication that past education and information sources of UTP personnel have done a good job in providing relevant and accurate knowledge to them. Based on this section's finding, we can conclude that the majority of UTP personnel have a high level of comprehension regarding possible adaptation measures towards climate change, which also means that they are knowledgeable on how to tackle climate change issues. The ninth section, Section H, is meant to determine the level of risk perception of respondents on climate change issues. By looking at the findings, the respondents are quite perceptive about the risks of climate change. They understand how climate change would cause certain sectors and their own life problems. The severity of climate change effects is known by the respondents. Thus, we can conclude that the majority of UTP personnel have a high level of risk perception on climate change issues. The 10th section, Section I, is meant to determine the attitudes of respondents towards climate change issues. Based on the findings in this section, the respondents are highly aware of how much humans has caused harm to the environment and eventually caused climate change. Thus, we can conclude that the majority of UTP personnel have positive, self-reflecting attitudes on climate change issues. Then, by combining the information from the previous section, we can see that UTP personnel have a high level of knowledge, awareness, and perception of climate change issues. Thus, H3 is supported. We can conclude that if UTP personnel have adequate knowledge, awareness, and perception towards climate change issues, then they will have a positive attitude towards climate change issues. The 11th section, Section J, is meant to determine the respondents' response and feedback towards pro-environmental behavior. Based on the findings in this section, most UTP personnel are willing to act and mitigate climate change issues. Thus, we can conclude that UTP personnel has pro-environmental behavior. From section I, we found that UTP personnel have positive self-reflecting attitudes towards climate change. By combining the two conclusions that we got, H4 is now supported. Thus, we can conclude that if UTP personnel possess a positive attitude towards climate change, then they will also possess better pro-environmental behavior.
Based on our finding, students' existing understanding of climate change is shown to have sufficient understanding, accuracy, and knowledge. However, there is room for improvement. As a result, students are deemed to have awareness and a positive attitude toward climate change. Proper environmental knowledge can aid in the resolution of future environmental issues. Hence, there is a need to enhance climate change knowledge and foster a positive attitude toward climate change. For the hypothesis 1, if University Technology Petronas personnel use renewable energy and practices waste reduction, then they have and will continue to incorporate recycling concepts in their daily life. And this is supported as it is consistent with previous studies on the relationship between good behavior and recycling. They believe that environmental deterioration can be reversed by engaging in responsible ecological behaviors. A transformation in society's consumptions habits and a reduction in the quantity of solid waste produced would assist in mitigating climate change considerably. The view of waste as a resource and its value as such is basic basis for promoting such transformed mindsets. Recycling is crucial as it conserves capacity, extends the lifespan of existing landfills, and makes an impact on global climate change. For the hypothesis 2, if University Technology Petronas personnel is an environmental activist who recycles daily and participates in the Go Green Movement program, which is conducted by University Technology Petronas, then they will have an adequate level of awareness of climate change issues. Is also supported as it is consistent with previous studies on the relationship between pro-environmental actions and awareness. Going green is an action that must be done conceptually while dealing with environmental issues. Go green refers to any efforts to rehabilitate, preserve, and enhance the state of land for it to generate and operate optimally, whether as a water regulatory or environmental protection. The Go Green Movement program is held to raise public awareness of environmental problems, especially climate change issues, and teach people about green behavior. Green behavior in a society is described as ways or behaviors through which individuals take action to maintain a healthy environment. Joining the Go Green Movement program may raise awareness of climate change issues, and green behavior should be practiced by all individuals in society to protect the environment.
Next is discussion on H3. Our findings support H3, which states that if University Technology Petronas personnel have adequate knowledge, awareness, and perception towards climate change issues, then they will have a positive attitude towards climate change issues. Our finding is consistent with previous studies on the relationship between knowledge, awareness, perception, and attitude on climate change issues in Malaysia context. Climate change knowledge and awareness are critical because they involve understanding the current situation, causes, impacts, and the role of human involvement in climate change. Higher education will have an impact on people's attitudes toward the environment because it will likely lead to greater information accessibility through increased exposure to news information. Adequate knowledge, awareness, and perception will result in widespread concern about the personal impact of global climate change. Individuals are willing to alter their lifestyles and work habits to mitigate the effects of climate change. Last is discussion on H4. The findings support H4, which states that if university technology patronage personnel possesses positive attitude towards climate change, then they will also possess better pro-environmental behavior. Our finding is consistent with previous studies on the relationship between positive attitude and pro-environmental behavior on climate change issues in Malaysia context. Pro-environmental behavior has become necessary to combat the adverse effects of climate change. Citizens' pro-environmental behavioral intentions are influenced by their attitudes toward climate change, and individuals with positive attitudes toward the environment were positively correlated with participation in a high-effort experimental recycling program. People with a positive attitude towards climate change and practices pro-environmental behavior, as well as those who care about the environment, are more likely to participate in environmental protection actions. Thus, public in Malaysia should concern about climate change issues and participate actively in environmental programs and activities to solve the climate change issues.
In the conclusion, based on the results and analysis, we found that the level of awareness, knowledge and perception of UTP personnel on climate change is high, and this has positively influenced their attitude towards climate change and pro-environmental behavior, as they are willing to commit and change for the better. Next, in the significance based on the findings, discovered that climate change issues keep becoming worse every day, and addressing climate change difficulties will require a major effort from everyone. Then, in this research, successfully stopped all personnel of UTP from ignoring climate change issues or dismissing them as unimportant, since it has firmly conveyed to them. This study also has played a crucial role to provide policymakers of the local authorities and UTP for the evidence and data that they needed to use for the development and incorporation of new policies that promote a positive influence on attitudes toward climate change issues and pro-environmental behavior efficiently in Malaysian universities. As an implication of this study, policymakers of UTP create and incorporate new policies to combat climate change more effectively by referring to the data and statistics gained from this study as the main reference. Further research conducted to identify new innovative ways to improve the awareness of an individual on climate change instead of having to do usual surveys, talks, campaigns and programs that are not very efficient, and to make individuals have more interest and voluntarily be active members of any environmental organizations. That's all from us. Thank you.